much gun violence in our city and indeed in our nation. We are losing too many of our neighbors to senseless and cowardly shootings. We are frustrated, we're angry, we're sad about it, and we talk to young people all the time about gun violence. I heard from many of them at a budget forum last week, and we know a lot of our young people are scared. So as mayor of our city, it is especially important for me to focus on what we need the Congress to do, despite the fact that we don't have two senators that can move along common sense gun regulation for our nation. Like many Americans, I'm grateful for advocates like the Giffords Law Center, Moms Demand Action, and Everytown for Gun Safety, who are all represented here today. But these organizations could accomplish so much more if our Congress would treat gun violence like the public health crisis that it is. We don't want any more finger pointing. We want action. And we must seek out every solution that is within our control. And that is what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about ghost guns. These are guns that are intentionally designed to be undetectable and untraceable. And even scarier, people are buying the parts for these ghost guns online and assembling those guns at home. We have seen a significant increase in ghost guns recovered in D.C. in the last 3 years. In 2017, MPD recovered only 3 ghost guns. In 2018, that number jumped to 25 ghost guns. And last year, in 2019, MPD recovered 116 ghost guns. So far this year, we have recovered 38 of them. The emergency legislation that we will advance to the council would prohibit the possession of any type of ghost gun and prohibit any D.C. resident from possessing partially completed parts of the firearm from this kit. You will hear them referred to as an 80% kit. We have a permanent version of the legislation at the council, and I want to acknowledge and thank Councilmember Charles Allen from Ward 6, who is here and very supportive of this emergency. Charles also chairs the council's Committee on Public Safety and Justice. The permanent version of this bill will allow any victim of a ghost gun to sue the manufacturer of that ghost gun and hold them liable for their actions. We're working with legal experts to ensure this provision isn't impacted by federal legislation that protects commercial gun manufacturers from liability suits. The message we're sending with this legislation is simple. If you assist with, participate in, or profit from bloodshed in our community, we will hold you accountable. Now I'd like to introduce Councilmember Charles Allen, who will be followed by our Chief of Police, Peter Newsham.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. So next Tuesday, what the council will do is move this emergency legislation through. I'll be proud to move this forward to my colleagues, and I expect that we'll be able to pass this. And I'm glad we'll be able to work with very collaboratively with the mayor, with MPD, with DFS, with OAG to get this legislation moving forward. You can see and hear about the urgency of what we see with these ghost guns. The increase that we've seen, where it used to be a rare occasion that we would find one, and it was about once a month, and now MPD is recovering that ghost gun, what's referred to as a ghost gun, on a very regular basis. And so we need to take the action as we're watching this trend develop across the city, which is really a workaround that people are attempting around our common sense and very strong gun laws that exist in the District of Columbia. And it's just one more way as we look at the variety of tools that we've done, everything from increased penalties on extended magazine clips to red flag laws and the host and suite of issues that we try to work on to help reduce gun violence in the district. And this will be one more tool, and I'm glad to be able to work with the mayor and her team to focus on this, to try to get these guns off our street and out of the hands before they do harm and violence to our residents. Thank you, Ms. Mayor, and we'll bring up the chief.
Thank
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Bowser. Thank you, Councilmember Allen. I'm Peter Newsham. I'm the Chief of Police for the Metropolitan Police Department. You've heard me say on many occasions that MPD is committed to playing our role in reducing gun violence in the District of Columbia. Getting illegal guns off of our streets and out of the hands of repeat violent offenders is one of our top priorities. This can be very difficult and dangerous work, but our officers believe it's critical to saving lives. In 2019, MPD officers seized over 2,000 illegal firearms from our community. So far this year, we are on pace to recover more than that. In the past 3 years, we've been seeing an increasing number, like the mayor said, of ghost guns being recovered in our city. Ghost guns are untraceable and unregulated firearms that generally come in two types. The first type is the undetectable type that are manufactured by 3D printers and generally made of non-metal materials that cannot be picked up by metal detectors. To date, we have not recovered any of those type of ghost guns in the District of Columbia. The second type is ordered as an 80% kit, like the mayor mentioned, and assembled. It can be assembled without sophisticated machinery. These guns do not have a serial number, and they impede law enforcement's ability to trace the gun back to its source. As mentioned, MPD has recovered more ghost guns each year over the last 3 years, and this year we are on track to eclipse the 2019 ghost gun recoveries. In 2017, MPD recovered 3 ghost guns. In 2018, that number jumped to 25. Last year, in 2019, we recovered 116 ghost guns. So far this year, we've recovered 31 ghost guns, which puts us on pace to recover more than 180 ghost guns this year. We are aware of at least 4 ghost guns that were associated with homicides. An additional one was used to almost assassinate 2 of our reserve officers on Hawaii Avenue at the 7-Eleven. And we have recovered ghost guns in assaults and robberies. There is clearly an increased market for these weapons, and our concern is that these ghost guns sidestep state and federal regulations on laws on firearms. By law, licensed gun manufacturers are required to engrave identifying information, a serial number, on the weapon, and distributors must record the transfer of the firearm to the purchaser. When that doesn't happen, and these ghost guns show up on crime scene, that presents a problem. Assembling and selling these types of firearms is not a hobby. It is a direct threat to public safety, and we believe there is a substantial public interest in ensuring that firearms can be detected and traced back to their source so we can identify how guns are being introduced into our city. I want to thank Mayor Bowser and Councilmember Allen for proposing this gun legislation in the district. It will give our officers, investigators, an additional tool for combating gun violence in the District of Columbia. I'm now going to turn to Dr. Jennifer Smith from our Department of Forensic Sciences to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jennifer Smith. I'm the director of the Department of Forensic Sciences. I'd like to thank the mayor, Councilmember Allen, and the chief for allowing me an opportunity to highlight the work that is being conducted by the women and men in our crime labs for, firearms examination unit who are skilled in firearms examinations. Since 2017, DFS firearms examiners have been following this trend and the appearance of ghost guns in our city. In that year, to put it in perspective, only 0.1% of the guns brought to our lab were ghost guns. But now, over 8% of the guns we're seeing that we are receiving are these ghost guns. It is important to know, though, that these are real guns. Just because they're considered untraceable does not mean they are incapable of causing irreparable harm. These are real guns. And at the department, our firearms examiners are able to take this evidence from these ghost guns and still do all the testing that we would do on any other gun because they are real guns. Therefore, we don't treat these weapons any differently than other firearms we examine every day. We conduct the same forensic analysis on these types of weapons. And as a number of these ghost guns have increased, we will put this information into our NIBIN system that we have talked about before. Our experts continue to upload the information we receive into the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, and they continue to use this system to provide law enforcement with leads in these shooting-related investigations. So though we refer to them as ghost guns, we are still able to retrieve critical and reliable information. We are sharing this with law enforcement to find those who are perpetrating these crimes using these weapons. Thank you very much to the mayor, to Councilmember Allen for their continued support to the Department of Forensic Sciences. And I enjoy working with our partners in this, to include the Chief of Police, as well as our other critical stakeholders in the city.
I'd like to now invite Elizabeth Weezer, who's representing Attorney General Carl Racine.
Good afternoon, Mayor Bowser. Thank you, Councilmember Allen, Chief Newsham, Director Smith. It's wonderful to be here to talk about this very, very important legislation. On behalf of Attorney General Carl Racine, we want you to know that our office is committed to working with our agency partners to address the issue of ghost guns in the district. In accordance with that effort, our office is working hard in multi-state litigation to try to make sure that the federal government is held accountable for the issue of the ghost guns coming into our jurisdiction. We are working with our colleagues in other state AG's offices to learn about what they are doing in their respective jurisdictions with regard to addressing these issues civilly, such as with cease and desist letters and civil actions. And we want you to know that we are going to work very hard with our partners in this jurisdiction, and we're going to use every available law that we have at our disposal to make sure that ghost guns are no longer an issue in the District of Columbia. So we're here to wholeheartedly support the mayor's legislation, and we look forward to positive results in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, and we are available for questions. I want to introduce Deputy Mayor Kevin Downey, who is my Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, and thank you and your team for advancing the legislation. Questions? Yes, Sam.
I'm going to ask Kevin a question.
Sure.
So I read that you said that the Second Amendment doesn't apply here. Could you talk about that?
The Second Amendment applies to anything that's considered a firearm. The challenge is that if you have a kit that comes with 80% of the firearm and then a second kit with 20%, it doesn't meet the legal definition of being a firearm. So what these websites do, and they do it quite openly, is they sell products that are known to be easy to put together as a way of avoiding the type of background checks that many states of all varieties have put in place to try to control and check who gets firearms and to be able to trace them when there's a crime that's committed. So think of the ghost guns, these 80% kits, as workarounds to the hard work that legislative bodies and advocates have done over the years. And this legislation will identify that loophole and, at least for D.C., prohibit the shipment of those and the possession of those 80% kits into the district.
So this would tell companies that they should not send them into anybody trying to buy them here in the city?
That's correct.
Can I follow up on that? So who is actually committing the crime? Who would be held responsible if somebody ships it? Is it the person who is receiving it here in D.C., or is it the manufacturer or seller who's shipping?
The person who's receiving and possessing it in D.C. So it's a possession. The law creates a criminal act of the possession of these 80% kits. And that's the focus of the emergency legislation. We're working on permanent legislation that would allow us, which gives us the time to work on larger and more legally complex details, such as whether there's a civil private right of action if a crime is committed, to be able to hold accountable the manufacturers of these 80% kits.
Do you know what our neighboring jurisdictions, what their situation is with respect to this?
The issue is very new, and what I'd point out is that even police departments around the country are only beginning to recognize that when they capture an illegal firearm and they recover it, to start to tag it and track it if it's a ghost gun. So I think a number of jurisdictions are waking up to a phenomenon that's legitimately new. Police departments in many jurisdictions are now instructing their officers to be able to tag and track them. I credit NPD and our forensic lab for being one of the early jurisdictions to adopt and track this. So I don't have any doubt that this discussion and coverage of our law will prompt conversations in Virginia, Maryland, and other states nationally to look at whether they have a phenomena that allows individuals to bypass their gun laws.
We haven't seen the legislation. What kind of penalties are we talking about? Are they felonies? Are they misdemeanors? And also, are you guys in touch with the U.S. Attorney's Office to actually bring such cases?
Who wants to talk about penalties? Okay.
So as you point out, one of the challenges about crime in the District of Columbia is that we've got two local law enforcement agencies that prosecute crime, right? We've got the U.S. Attorney's Office that prosecutes some felonies and some misdemeanors, and our office, the Office of the Attorney General, prosecutes some misdemeanors with regard to possessory gun offenses, right? So we can prosecute people for possession of an unregistered firearm. That's a very specific case that's only a misdemeanor. The U.S. Attorney's Office prosecutes all of the felony gun possession cases as well as the felony assaultive conduct, right? And so this legislation, I believe, is a possessory violation, a more regulatory violation, right? The possession of the gun, it doesn't have a serial number, it's not registerable, so I would expect that is something that would be under the jurisdiction of the Office of the Attorney General. We would prosecute it in our office.
And penalties would be months, years? You haven't figured it out yet?
I'm not sure what the legislation actually says about the penalty. I'm not sure if that's been adequately addressed yet. But if the if the Office of the Attorney General prosecutes it, the penalty would be a year or less.
Thank you.
And I wanted, Harry, to have the chief talk to you a little bit. You know, we have a new U.S. attorney, and we are, of course, focused on guns of all kinds and making sure that when MPD is making great arrests for guns, that there is a penalty for possessing or using an illegal gun in the district. And I wanted the chief to talk a little bit about that.
So yes, Mayor, thank you. I have met with Tim Shea on a couple of occasions already. I have told him, and I've had these conversations with the mayor as well, how concerned we are about gun violence here in the District of Columbia. He has assured me that he is going to put that at the top of his priorities. He's also assured me that some of the things that we were working with the former U.S. Attorney, we're going to continue along that path. I think some of the initiatives, like our felon in possession initiative, is something that's going to be very helpful to us as we move down the road. You know, you can look at these guns that are on the table in front of me. Those are ghost guns. They are equally as dangerous as any firearm that is introduced into our city. I have to applaud the mayor and Councilmember Allen for being on the forefront of this issue, for ensuring that law enforcement here in our city has all the tools that they can possibly have to address guns, illegal guns, and gun violence in the District of Columbia. Peter.
Hold on 1 second.
Just want to quickly clarify on the penalty. So it is a 1-year misdemeanor unless you have prior convictions, at which point it can go up to a 10-year threshold.
Any indication of where you've been able to learn where any of these guns have come from? Either sold or built, or they built here or built elsewhere, or have you?
So as I mentioned in my comments, is that they're relatively easy to assemble. It doesn't take a very sophisticated technical person to put it together. You can do it with machinery that's easily to acquire. We have, with our federal partners, have a couple of investigations I can't talk about in detail right now, where we have found some folks that are assembling these guns. And I want to reemphasize my message is that this is not a hobby, it's not a game, this is very serious business, and we're going to take it very seriously.
Without revealing too much, can you say if they're assembling them in the district or outside the district?
That would be revealing too much, Peter, but it's a good question.
So can I ask, California, which is one of the states that's a little bit ahead on this, actually allows for manufacturers to ship these kits into California if they print a serial number on them. And then there are people who do this as hobbyists and enthusiasts who are not criminals with bad intent. And California allows them to build these kits and then take them in and have them registered if they otherwise qualify to have a gun. Did D.C. consider making that an option here? Is that something that you would consider here?
Yeah, I don't think that's a question for me, but I will comment on some of the things that you said. We have not had any indication here in the District of Columbia with the ghost guns that we have recovered that those were intended to be possessed in a legal way. So the ghost guns that we have recovered here in the district are ghost guns that we have found to be used in criminal offenses. The ones that we have recovered from people are weapons that have been possessed with bad intentions.
And I'll just add, we're talking about an emergency here, and Councilmember Allen is considering the permanent piece of legislation. There has been one hearing, but I don't want to speak for you, but I know that he will thoroughly review any tweaks that need to be made to the law that respect the rights of responsible owners. Yes.
Question for Dr. Smith. Has anybody been killed by these ghost guns? And what do you call a ghost gun? If somebody removes the serial number, is that counted amongst these ghost guns that you're reporting?
Well, as Dr. Smith comes to the podium, I want to reiterate something she said, and I think that this display emphasizes it too. Ghost guns are real guns. And so sometimes we don't want anybody to think it's fun and games or something that shouldn't be taken seriously. They will kill you.
Yes, so some of these guns have been collected in the investigation of homicides. And to your point, there have been, over time, individuals who will try to obliterate serial numbers. So we also see those types of weapons where they really try to remove that. We do not count those as ghost guns because they actually have a serial number, and then it's our job to work very hard to reveal those original numbers. The ghost guns, if you look at these, you will see there's an area that is intended for a serial number to be placed on that, and it's totally blank. So that's the key factor when we look at these weapons in determining and calling them a ghost gun.
Okay, last question.
Ghost guns that have been recovered, do you know if the people who you caught with these guns are the people who actually assembled them? Have you been able to determine that?
That's the difficulty, is to be able to understand where the weapon came from or the source of the weapon. You have to rely on human intelligence. And other than the couple of cases that we're working with our federal partners, we have not been able to gather a lot of human intelligence on where these guns are being manufactured.
Okay. Mayor Bowser, can we ask about coronavirus?
Sure.
Can you give us any update as far as the city's preparedness, and particularly there have been reports of some jurisdictions getting test kits that are sending back inconclusive results, and I'm just wondering where we are as far as test kits and preparedness.
Sure. I will ask Dr. Smith, who also runs our public health lab, to talk more specifically about that. But let me just give you an update. I just convened a meeting of our public health officials and emergency preparedness officials. I invited many of our critical stakeholders, including the National Guard and Metro and the Airports Authority and our travel agency, to all talk about our preparedness and planning. I am pleased that we have the systems and resources to be prepared for a health emergency in the district. I will issue a mayor's order a little bit later today outlining how all of our agencies will be communicating and planning and disseminating information to the public. Our Department of Health, led by Dr. LaQuandra Nesbitt, is our lead agency, closely assisted by DCHCMA, our Homeland Security Agency. We will convene, as we have done with other other, preparedness activities, we'll convene a call with our stakeholders, including the D.C. Council, Advisory Neighborhood Commissioners in the coming days as well, so they are most up to date on the district's planning. So the district is open for business. The district is prepared to deal with a health emergency, and we will get information out to the public about all of our communication strategies.
Mayor,
Dr. Smith, 1 second on the testing.
Yes, so right now the CDC is in control of the development of the test. It is a specific and sensitive test. The tests are being done at the CDC are reliable. In early February, they shipped those to certain public health labs. As they scaled up sort of the reagents for those tests, public health labs began testing to include our laboratory. We found no issues with the tests, but some laboratories saw that there were some issues with some of the reagents that they had been sent. So the CDC took a look at that with FDA. This is actually approved by FDA. And we are now in the process where they have given additional instructions, and we're in the process of verifying that test. And we hope to have it in line here in D.C. and be early next week.
Any suspected cases here in D.C.?
We had 5 individuals, and they have all been tested to be negative.
There have been some concerns from DC tourism about the possible impact on tourism, given that China is such a big tourist sender for us here, and then cherry blossom season coming up very soon. What are your concerns about tourism?
We got an update on tourism, and of course we are always concerned when people who want to see our great city can't get here, and we recognize that Chinese tourists especially may have impacts to their travel plans. The Cherry Blossom Festival will not be impacted. It's about actually, even though we celebrate our great friendship with Japan, during the Cherry Blossom Festival, 92% of participants are domestic participants. So we don't expect any impact to the Cherry Blossom Festival. At this time, we don't have any of our conventions impacted, though some participants, especially coming from the level 3 countries, may not be able to participate. What we know is that we learn something new every day, and it's a fluid situation. And so I invite everybody to follow us at our DC Health website for updates. And the mayor's order that will be issued later will also outline all of our communication lanes. Thank you, everybody.